Hi, I'm Alan with Doc Holiday Tattoo. This is Brian. We're going to be going through a consultation for tattoo removal using the Tatt2Away system. And specifically, we're going to be discussing Discover Up. In other words, partial removal for the purposes of cover up with another tattoo. So, today we're going to be discussing this piece right here. So Brian, the first thing I'm going to ask you is just way off the top of your head, what type of tattoo, what size of tattoo would you want to place over this?
Well, I was thinking maybe we could do like a high definition Buddha head, like just to cover it up with a larger Buddha face.
Okay. So in order to do that, the colors in here we won't necessarily need to worry too much about, because if we're going into a Buddha face, we're going to have a lot of the different colorations and whatnot in it already. So what we really need to do is concentrate on the blacks and getting rid of that so that you're able to cover it with anything else. In order to cover up any tattoo, the general rule of thumb is it must be larger and darker. With this particular type of removal, what we can do is we can target certain areas. So what we'll do is we'll look at targeting out all the black and the black in the line work. That way, once that's gone, we're able to place whatever we want over it. The other thing is once we have the actual design that's going to go there, we'll be able to see what black we can actually keep. Because some of it we may be able to keep, which means you're not going to have to remove all of it. So, in order to remove any part of this, the way this type of removal works is done in piecemeal. Unlike laser, where they hit the entire piece, and it essentially causes little nuclear explosions to break down the ink on a molecular level, we're physically lifting the ink up and out of the skin. In order to do that, we have to remove the epidermis. So your ink sits in that layer between your epidermis and your dermis. We need to get rid of the epidermis so we can get to where the ink actually is. Now, we don't do that on the whole piece all at once, because what that'll do is it'll create this huge gaping open wound that will never heal. So what we do is we use a little template that I'll pull off and I'll show you here in a second, and we create little small 5mm circles. When we remove the epidermis from this circle, it exposes the ink itself. And then when it heals from the outside in and from the bottom up. So it creates a scab that when it lifts up and out, the scab is the color of the ink. The scab falls off within 2 to 3 weeks on average. And then you're left with brand new, bright pink skin. Once that heals, then you're able to move towards another removal session or straight into tattooing. You need to give it time to heal though, because that bright pink skin, it's like that skin that's underneath that freshly popped blister. Okay, so it's really new, it's really thin, and it's really sensitive. So you got to give it time to heal. You know, a few months. You don't need to wait a year or 2 years. But unlike laser, I could remove this entire tattoo and you could be getting tattooed again in a year's time. Where laser, it could take several years to remove the tattoo. And I know that from experience because I had my tattoos removed and it took 9 years. And then I waited another 5 years before I had them tattooed again. So, but where we're going for a partial removal, depending on how much we remove, we'll be able to start tattooing in 3 to 4 months time after those scabs come off. Okay. So in something like this, where I would say the first thing we need to do is really concentrate on the black. We have a large section of black here. We've got a concentration of black here on the head, and the rest of it is really line work, okay? So we use this template and we do it in two different ways. Number one, in this area, we would use more of the solid portion of the template, okay? Meaning I would remove this section of the tattoo in its entirety because we have the dark blacks as well as we have some of the lighter blacks. Even if we don't lift all of the lighter black and grays out, we'd end up removing most of it. Down in this area, what we would do is we would concentrate on just the line work. So here in a minute, I'll put down this template and actually draw some of the circles on so you'll see how it works. But here, for instance, I would use this section of the template. But down here, I would just use a few dots as I go around. So when it comes to pricing, the price is generally the price of the template. However, I would only use part of the template for this. So I could actually end up removing, within one session, the majority of the line work, piecemeal of course, but using just one template. So that actually ends up saving you money in the long run. So the template itself is this nice little sticky template full of all these little tiny dots, little holes. And that's what they have found to be the ideal size for maximum healing as well as pulling the ink. So when the time comes to actually do this, what I would do is I would find a nice area where I get maximum amount of coverage. And then I go in and I start drawing the dots. Now, every kit comes with our own little marker. So then, and this is the hardest part for me. For you, it's when I start removing it. But for me, this is the hardest part because this is clear and it's kind of hard to see. So bear with me for a second. And I'm just going to circle on these little dots. It's going to require 3 treatments. And what that does is that gives us the ability, sorry about the tape, so that gives us the ability to go in and remove these sections. When those scabs fall off and they heal and that skin begins to fade more to the natural color, then when we come in for our next treatment, what I do is I offset the pattern, okay? And then by offsetting the pattern, then I start taking out those sections in between. And then the third treatment, I offset it yet again, and that's where we kind of do the cleanup, if you will. We remove everything that's left. All right. So this is what it would look like for this entire area where it's more of the solid blacks. You would have this polka dotted look all the way around. Now, in contrast to that is the line work. The way I would do the line work, again, it's in the same piecemealed style, but instead of trying to go in here and remove every little bit of ink, we concentrate just on the line work, and we would follow that, and I'll just throw some examples down. So we would go through and use this for one session, but then next time, when we offset the pattern up here, when we come down to here, now I'm removing the sections in between. So your line work is essentially gone in 2 sittings, where the more solid work is done in 3. Now, the only time where we run into something a little different than that is, for instance, in these areas here, where you've got extra black lines. Well, then I can't treat it exactly like a single line. But what I would do is I would go in, I'd place my circles, and then next time I would come in right in between and try to grab as much of it as I possibly can. Now let's say we have your actual design by the time we get started on the removal, and we find, is it okay if I draw on you a little more?
Mm-hmm.
We find that the size of the tattoo is going to be more like this. Centered a little more on the forearm and getting rid of this in its entirety. Then it's no problem. Then what we do is we concentrate just like we have here. Again, we're still going to go for the majority of the removal of all the black work. We're going to remove all this in its entirety over the course of our 3 sittings. But let's say your design has a fair amount of black work in it. Mm-hmm. Say in hair specifically. So what that gives us is it gives us the ability to say, even though we're going to completely remove this, in this area here, we don't need to completely remove it. But what we do need to do is break up the pattern so that once we put the new lines in for the new tattoo, you're not going to see this pattern behind it. We're going to break it up enough that the new lines trick the eye to the point where you don't see it. Because in any cover-up, 9 out of 10 times, if you know what you're looking for, you see the old tattoo.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It stands through the new tattoo. But if by going in here, we just break up that pattern, then say the new tattoo is going to have a hairline that goes maybe like that. All right. Mm-hmm. Well, then now we know that the majority of this, all we have to do is break it up. Mm-hmm. We don't have to completely remove it. We know we need to completely remove this, and we know we need to do more concentrated removal in these areas, but we don't need to do as much here. And then we concentrate on the lines through there, as well as complete removal on the back side, since the new tattoo won't include any of that. But now you've got yourself into a position where instead of having to sit around for literally years going through removal through laser, or going through an entire year of removal through Tatt2Away, now we're going to be able to remove what needs to be removed for the purposes of cover-up, and we can get all that done likely in 2, maybe 3 treatments, which means you will be physically getting tattooed within 8 to 12 months. To do the procedure, we actually use a modified tattoo rotary machine. So this is a pen style machine. And in some Tatt2Away studios, they use more of a traditional looking tattoo machine or Tatt2Away machine. Again, it's a rotary machine. The only difference really between this style of machine, either of these, and an actual tattoo machine is this has the ability to adjust the depth right here, which adjusts the depth of the needle. So the other equipment we use is, I said that we remove the epidermis. The way we remove the epidermis is by using essentially tattoo equipment. We use the machine, and we use what is a 7-round shader needle. It's a cartridge needle. This is not your standard Cheyenne, T-Tac, or Elite needle. This is a specific needle cartridge that is designed just for the Tatt2Away removal system. But then we connect the Teprosol solution to the tubing, and using this Teprosol pump, it pushes the Teprosol through the tubing down into the needle cartridge, and using that's what actually dissolves and lifts away the epidermis and gets down to the needle, or to the pigment itself. So one of the best things that I like about the Tatt2Away and using it for cover-ups specifically is, as a tattooist, I'm able to determine exactly what I want to get rid of in its entirety and what I can just break up patterns with. The other cool thing is I'm able to work with other artists. There's artists throughout town that have sent clients to me where we're in the process of removing just partial pieces so that tattooist can then put on the new artwork. I'm able to work hand in hand with other tattooists. We can come in and during a consultation, we can even put a stencil right down on the ink so we know exactly what we need to get rid of. It just gives us the ability to get the customer what they want sooner rather than having to wait for a complete removal. It boils down to flexibility and options.